Beneath the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia lies an entire hidden civilization. This video will give you a complete tour of the ancient underground cities built to survive the apocalypse. We will uncover who engineered these vast subterranean fortresses and what terrifying threats they were designed to withstand. How did thousands of people live for months in complete darkness, and what forgotten knowledge allowed them to thrive? What does our own instinct to build shelters say about humanity's deepest fears? Millions of years before human hands ever touched it, the stage was set by fire. A series of immense volcanic eruptions blanketed this region of central Turkey in a deep, soft layer of ash and lava. Over eons, this material compacted into a stone called tuff. It is not like granite or marble, hard and unyielding. Tuff is malleable, almost like a dense, solidified sand. You can carve it with simple bronze or even wooden tools. This was the geological gift, the blank canvas upon which an entire hidden civilization would be etched. Wind and water then began their slow, artistic work, sculpting the surreal landscape we see today. They carved the iconic fairy chimneys, those tall, thin spires of rock capped with harder stone, which stand like silent sentinels across the valleys. But more importantly for our story, they created a world of soft cliffs and deep gorges, a terrain that naturally whispers of secrecy and concealment. For the people who arrived here, the earth itself presented an invitation. The ground beneath their feet was not just land to farm or build upon, it was a building material. It was their quarry, their bricks, and their ultimate fortress all in one. They did not have to haul stone or mix mortar. To create a room, they simply had to remove what was not the room. This unique relationship with the landscape meant that expanding a home or even digging an entire city was a matter of patience and labor, not impossible engineering. The very rock that formed their world above ground became the walls of their sanctuary below it. This perfect geological condition was the first, non-negotiable ingredient for what was to come. It solved the monumental question of how to build a hidden world, but it immediately raises the next, more urgent question. Why would an entire community choose to abandon the sun and sky, to retreat into the silent, dark heart of the earth? What was so threatening that the only logical response was to disappear? The answer to that question lies not in one era, but in layers of time stacked like the rock itself. To find the beginning, we must journey back over 3,000 years to the heart of the Bronze Age. This is the world of the Hittites, a formidable empire of charioteers and lawmakers whose capital, Hattusa, stood hundreds of miles to the north. They ruled a vast territory, and Cappadocia was within their sphere of influence. The Hittites were masters of fortification, building immense stone walls and citadels atop hills. So why would such a powerful, surface-dwelling civilization be linked to the first tunnels beneath Cappadocia? Archaeologists point to a practical Hittite specialty, storage. Their above-ground granaries and silos were engineering marvels, but in the soft tuff of Cappadocia, they may have found an even better solution. Digging down created naturally climate-controlled spaces, perfect for preserving grain, oil, and wine through scorching summers and freezing winters. These would not have been cities yet, but rather secure, subterranean pantries. Yet the world of the Bronze Age was also a world of shifting alliances and sudden conflict. The Hittite Empire eventually collapsed, fragmenting under pressure from internal strife and so-called sea peoples. In such turbulent times, a hidden cellar could quickly become a hiding place. A storage chamber dug deep into a hillside could be expanded just a little to allow a family to wait out a passing raid. This is the compelling theory. The Hittites, or the local peoples under their sway, may have initiated the very first cuts into the rock. They created a template, a proof of concept, that the earth could be a practical partner. Their simple chambers and tunnels were the first stitches in a vast, hidden tapestry. When their empire faded, the knowledge of how to work the soft stone did not disappear. It remained a buried seed. Later peoples arriving in the same valleys would have discovered these ancient hollows in the cliffs. They would have seen their utility and thought, we can go deeper. We can connect them, we can build upon what was already here. This idea transforms our understanding of the underground cities. They were not sprung fully formed from the mind of a single architect. They grew organically and across centuries, each generation adding to the work of the last, inheriting and expanding a subterranean blueprint. The Hittite enigma suggests that the impulse to seek safety below is an ancient, recurring human response to a precarious world. It sets a profound precedent, showing that long before the famous cities reached their peak, the roots of this hidden world were already gripping the deep earth. But the stone's true calling would not be answered for centuries until a new kind of fervor arrived in the valleys. The world above had changed. The Roman Empire, once pagan, had officially embraced Christianity, but this new unity was fragile and often brutal. In the 4th century, theological disagreements erupted into violent conflict. For communities who held beliefs now deemed heretical by the imperial church, the wide open spaces of the empire became a dangerous place. They were hunted, their gatherings forbidden, their very existence a challenge to orthodoxy. Where could a persecuted people go to preserve their faith? Their gaze turned east to the remote, almost lunar landscape of Cappadocia. It was a perfect refuge, isolated, difficult to access, and surrounded by that soft, carvable rock. And when they arrived, they made a stunning discovery. The land was not empty. They found the old tunnels, the ancient storage chambers first cut by the Hittites and later used by others. These were not just holes in the ground. They were a foundation, a divine gift hidden in plain sight. A church father of the time, Basil the Great, who lived in Cappadocia, wrote of communities withdrawing into secluded places, describing believers who sought purity and safety away from the corrupting world. While not a direct blueprint, his writings evoke a reality of withdrawal and hidden devotion. For these early Christians, the existing tunnels were a sign. They began to expand them with a new, urgent purpose. This was no longer just about hiding from a passing army. This was about building a permanent, secret homeland for the soul. They connected chambers into vast multi-level complexes. They carved simple crosses into the walls, marking their spaces as sacred. They dug out hidden churches, complete with altars, baptismal fonts, and benches, all from the living rock. A single, narrow entrance could be sealed with a massive stone wheel, a final barrier against the world. Inside, they could live, worship, and sustain their community for months. They developed ingenious air shafts that reached the surface, disguised as natural wells. They carved complex ventilation systems to keep the air fresh and to hide the smoke from their cooking fires. The cities became fortresses of faith, where the rhythm of life was dictated by prayer and survival, not by the sun. This period of the early Christian exodus represents the city's second great birth. It transformed them from practical shelters into deeply spiritual spaces. The act of carving was an act of devotion. Every room, every tunnel was a testament to a belief worth disappearing for. This embedded a religious significance into the very stone that would last for 1,000 years, setting the stage for the city's most legendary and terrifying chapter yet. The scale of these hidden worlds defies belief. To understand their true purpose, we must descend into the most famous of them all, Derinkuyu. This is not a simple collection of caves. It is a vertical metropolis, a city turned on its head, plunging an estimated 8 stories deep into the earth. At its peak, historians believe it could have sheltered up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock and supplies for months at a time. That is a population larger than many ancient surface cities, all living in a carefully orchestrated darkness. Each level served a distinct purpose, a masterclass in subterranean urban planning. The upper floors were the bustling heart of daily life, with family dwellings carved around central courtyards. Deeper down, you would find the essential infrastructure of survival. Entire floors were dedicated to stables for animals, their warmth helping to heat the complex. There were communal kitchens, their chimneys cleverly designed to diffuse smoke so it would not betray their location. There were wineries and presses for making wine and oil, and even dedicated spaces for religious worship, with chapels and baptismal fonts hewn from the rock. This was a fully functional, self-contained society operating in total secrecy. Its defense began with a single, brilliant innovation: the massive stone door. These are not like any gates you have seen. They are immense circular slabs of rock, often weighing several hundred kilograms. They were set into shallow, sloping recesses in the corridor walls. In times of peace, they stood open, flush against the wall. But when danger approached, they could be rolled across the passageway and locked into a carved niche on the opposite side. From the inside, the door was virtually immovable. It sealed corridors between levels, allowing defenders to retreat deeper into the city while isolating any invaders who might breach the upper floors. Think of it as a series of airlocks or bulkheads in a submarine, each one containing a threat and buying precious time for those below. But a sealed city is a dead city without air and water. The engineers of Derinkuyu solved this with astonishing sophistication. Over 50 ventilation shafts, some stretching over 100 meters to the surface, brought a constant supply of fresh air to even the deepest chambers. These shafts were narrow and often disguised as natural wells, making them nearly impossible to block from above. More than just providing breathable air, they regulated temperature and humidity, preventing the lower levels from becoming damp and uninhabitable. The water supply was equally ingenious. Deep, protected wells tapped into underground aquifers, ensuring a source of clean water that could not be poisoned or cut off by an enemy on the surface. Waste was managed through designated pits, and the entire complex was designed with slight slopes to allow for drainage, a primitive but effective form of sanitation. What emerges from this blueprint is not a desperate hideout, but a meticulously planned ecosystem. It demonstrates an understanding of community needs, engineering, and long-term survival that rivals the design principles of modern bunkers or space stations. Every element, from the strategic placement of the stables to the hidden air vents, served a dual purpose, supporting both daily life and ultimate security. This was architecture born from a profound and enduring fear, transformed through generations of innovation into a testament to human resilience. It proves that these communities were not just hiding, they were preparing to outlast the end of their world above. But such a grand design begs a practical question, one that brings the story from the architectural to the deeply human. How did thousands of people actually live in this sunless stone labyrinth, and what psychological toll did such an existence take? The true genius of these cities is measured not in stone but in breath. For 20,000 people to survive for months in a sealed labyrinth, the air itself had to be engineered. This was their most critical, non-negotiable challenge. A single failed system would mean a slow, silent end for the entire population. Their solution was a masterpiece of passive engineering, a network of vertical air shafts that turned the entire city into a living, breathing organism. Picture a series of narrow chimneys, some plunging over 100 feet from the surface down to the very lowest levels. They were not random holes. They functioned as a natural ventilation system, exploiting a fundamental principle of physics. Warm air from the inhabited chambers, heated by body heat, cooking fires, and livestock, would naturally rise. As it rose up these shafts, it created a vacuum that pulled cooler, fresh air down from the surface through other shafts. This created a continuous, gentle circulation, a perpetual exchange that kept the atmosphere from growing stale or toxic. The placement was precise. Shafts were dug at strategic points to ensure no chamber was left without airflow, preventing deadly pockets of carbon dioxide or smoke from accumulating. The exhaust shafts also served a second, vital purpose. They disguised the evidence of life below. Smoke from kitchens and lamps would be diffused and carried upwards, emerging at the surface not as a telltale plume, but as a faint, almost imperceptible wisp easily mistaken for natural ground vapor. This principle of using vertical shafts to manage a vital resource did not appear in a vacuum. Historians see a fascinating parallel in the ancient Qanat systems of Persia, brilliant underground canals that tapped into mountain aquifers and used gentle slopes to transport water across arid deserts. It is a compelling thought that the same conceptual genius applied to channeling water beneath a desert might have been adapted centuries later and hundreds of miles away to channel air beneath a city. The builders of Cappadocia may have understood that whether you are guiding water through rock or guiding air through a shaft, you are mastering an invisible current essential for life. How did they calculate this without modern tools? They likely relied on generations of accumulated, hands-on knowledge. They understood the behavior of smoke, they felt the drafts in different tunnels, and they learned through trial and error exactly where to place a shaft to create the necessary draw. This was engineering by intuition and acute observation, a deep reading of the silent language of air and pressure. This ventilation miracle transforms our understanding of the city's purpose. A temporary hiding spot needs a hidden entrance. A long-term refuge needs a way to breathe. This system proves an intention to endure, to wait out a crisis not for days but for seasons. It turns the entire complex from a crypt into a cradle, a place where life could not just be hidden but sustainably preserved. Yet, securing air and water solves the physical needs of survival. It does not address the profound human need for meaning, for a connection to something greater than the darkness. How did a community sustain its spirit when it could no longer see the sky? While the city breathed, it also needed to drink. Securing a reliable water source was the second pillar of survival, a challenge met with even greater ingenuity than the air shafts. A besieged fortress can ration food, but without clean water, a community's end is swift and certain. The builders understood that their sanctuary's true strength lay not in its hidden doors, but in its access to the deep, secret veins of the earth. They engineered a self-contained hydraulic system that turned these stone labyrinths into true arcs, capable of floating a population through a drought of safety on the surface. The solution was a network of deep, protected wells. These were not simple holes dug to the first trickle of water. They were monumental undertakings, plunging straight down through multiple levels of the city to tap into stable underground aquifers, natural reservoirs held within the rock itself. In Derinkuyu, the primary well is located on the very lowest level, a profound strategic choice. This meant the entire weight of the city, all 8 stories of carved stone and community, stood guard above it. An enemy who breached the upper entrance would have to fight their way down through narrow, defensible corridors, past multiple rolling stone doors, just to reach the water source. It was a final redoubt protecting the very essence of life. The water drawn from these depths was cool, filtered by layers of stone, and most importantly, completely independent of any river, spring, or cistern on the surface. A hostile force could camp above ground for months, poisoning every visible water hole, and never touch this hidden supply. But bringing water in is only half the equation. A crowded, sealed environment faces the constant threat of waste and contamination, which could lead to devastating illness. The engineers foresaw this too. They designed the entire city with a subtle, consistent slope. This was no accident. Any liquid spilled or wastewater deliberately channeled would naturally flow downward. Dedicated pits and shafts on the lowest levels collected this runoff, preventing it from pooling in living spaces or seeping into and fouling the precious well water. It was a primitive but brilliantly effective form of sanitation, separating the clean from the contaminated within the belly of the earth. This holistic system, the deep, guarded well, and the deliberate drainage reveals a mindset focused on indefinite endurance. It transforms our understanding of these spaces from temporary bolt holes into permanent alternatives. They were not just hiding from a threat, they were prepared to outlast it, to wait until the world above became habitable again, even if that took years. This level of foresight touches on something profound. It shows a community so convinced of recurring danger that they invested generations of labor not in temples or palaces to the sky, but in a buried infrastructure for survival. The water system, silent and dark, was their ultimate declaration of independence from the surface world. With air and water secured, the physical needs for long-term survival were met. Yet a city is more than a biological machine. It is a collection of hearts and minds. This leads us to the most human dimension of all, the psychological landscape of a life lived without sunrise or sunset, and the silent rituals that held a community together in the endless dark. The silence of the city was guarded by stone sentinels. These were the great rolling doors, the final and most iconic line of defense. Carved from a single, solid block of the region's dense volcanic rock, each door was a massive disc, often standing as tall as a person and weighing several hundred kilograms. Their genius lay not in their immovable bulk, but in their precise balance. Set into a shallow, sloping niche carved into the corridor wall, they were mounted on a central pivot. From the inside, a single individual, using leverage against the rim, could set the great wheel in motion, rolling it smoothly across the passageway until it slotted into a matching groove on the opposite side. From the outside, however, it presented a seamless, unbroken wall of stone, impossible to pry open without the proper tools and knowledge. This simple mechanism transformed every corridor into a potential dead end for an invader and a secure barrier for those retreating deeper into the sanctuary. At the very heart of some doors, a small, carefully carved hole pierces the rock. Historians debate its purpose. It could have been a spy hole, allowing a defender to assess the threat on the other side in utter silence. Or it could have been a murder hole, a point from which to thrust a spear or pour something discouraging onto anyone trying to force their way through. Think of the profound moment of its use. The warning cries from the surface have reached the deepest levels. Families and livestock are hurried downward. From a high corridor, you hear the distant echoes of confusion, then the heavy, grinding rumble of stone on stone as the first door is sealed. The sound is final, a deep thunder that vibrates through the rock under your feet. One by one, down through the levels, the sequence repeats, each resonant thud marking another layer of security, another buffer of darkness between the community and the world above. When the last door rolled shut, the outside world ceased to exist. The cities were designed not as a single fortress, but as a series of nested, defensible chambers. An enemy who managed to break through the main entrance would find themselves in a dark, unfamiliar maze, forced to fight for every downward step, only to find another identical stone wheel blocking their path, with defenders possibly waiting in the shadows behind it. This architectural strategy speaks to a chillingly realistic mindset. The builders did not assume their first line of defense would hold. They planned for a slow, fighting retreat, sacrificing the upper levels to preserve the heart of the community far below. Each door was more than a barrier. It was a psychological weapon, transforming the invaders' advance into a claustrophobic nightmare, while granting the defenders time, control, and the ultimate advantage of knowing the labyrinth. This relentless focus on layered security confirms the cities were built in anticipation of a threat so persistent and severe that survival meant disappearing completely. then waiting in absolute silence for a danger to pass that might never truly be gone. But behind every sealed door, life had to go on. The true test of these subterranean fortresses was not just surviving, but living. Within the perpetual twilight, carved from the same rock as the defensive doors, were the spaces dedicated to community itself. Beyond the narrow, winding corridors built for defense opened up into unexpectedly large central halls. These were the hearts of the underground world, where the population would gather for more than just safety. Here, in the flickering light of oil lamps, decisions would be made, disputes settled, and the collective morale of thousands maintained. The scale of these rooms suggests a highly organized social structure, one that understood isolation could be as dangerous as any invader. Nearby, the communal kitchens buzzed with activity. Their hearths were not open pits but carefully carved niches designed to draw smoke into hidden ventilation channels. The smell of baking flatbread and simmering stews would have been a powerful anchor to normality, a sensory reminder of home even hundreds of feet below it. And in dedicated chambers, the gentle lowing of livestock provided a constant, comforting sound. Keeping animals underground was a practical necessity, a source of milk, meat, and warmth, but their presence also brought the familiar rhythms of surface life into the depths. Perhaps most telling are the carved-out wineries and olive presses. Producing wine and oil is not an act of mere subsistence, it is an act of culture. Wine was crucial for religious ritual, a sacrament that connected the community to their faith even when they could not see the sky. It was also a preservative, a calorie source, and a small luxury that spoke to a desire for more than just bare survival. These spaces reveal a society determined to preserve its way of life, not just its biological existence. How was order maintained in such a pressurized environment? While no written code has been found, the architecture itself suggests a blueprint. Living quarters were likely allocated by family unit or perhaps by trade, with artisans like blacksmiths or tanners working in specially ventilated areas. The very design enforced a kind of social contract. Fresh air and water flowed from communal systems that required collective upkeep. Noise, waste, and conflict had to be managed, for in a sealed environment, every action affected the whole. One can envision a council of elders meeting in a central hall, their voices echoing softly off the smooth walls, establishing rules for rationing, quiet hours, and the shared labor of maintenance. The psychological weight of this existence is almost unimaginable. Months without sunlight, the constant press of stone, the knowledge that the world above might be lost. What kept despair at bay? It must have been a fierce, shared purpose, reinforced by daily ritual and the unwavering rhythms of communal work and worship. The cities succeeded because they were more than shelters. They were societies reforged for the darkness, proving that humanity's greatest fortress is not made of stone, but of the bonds between those who hide within it. Yet even in this world of stone and shadow, the human spirit carved out spaces for light. Scattered throughout the labyrinth, often in the deepest and most secure levels, are the quiet chambers that reveal the city's true purpose. These are the rock-cut churches and chapels, their walls marked with simple, deeply incised crosses. In places like Derinkuyu, one can find a cruciform church, its floor plan carved in the shape of a cross, with a central altar and benches hewn directly from the living stone. The atmosphere in these rooms is profoundly different from the bustling communal halls. The air feels still, reverent. The only light would have come from the flicker of oil lamps, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn symbols of faith. Here, far from the reach of imperial authorities, communities could gather to worship freely, to baptize their children, and to reaffirm the beliefs for which they had retreated from the world. This practice of creating sacred spaces underground was not entirely new. It echoed the early Christian catacombs of Rome, where believers gathered in secret among the resting places of their loved ones, finding spiritual refuge in the earth. In Cappadocia, this tradition evolved into something more permanent, more ambitious. The act of carving a church from the rock was itself an act of profound devotion and defiance. Each strike of the chisel was a statement that their faith was as enduring and unshakable as the mountain itself. These sanctuaries represent the ultimate fusion of physical and spiritual survival. The massive stone doors protected the body, but these quiet chapels nourished the soul. They provided a center, a point of meaning around which the entire underground society could orient itself during months of darkness. The simple crosses on the walls were more than decoration, they were compass points, reminding everyone that their hardship had a higher purpose. This dimension transforms our understanding of the cities from mere fortresses into arcs of culture. They were designed to preserve not just human life, but a way of life, a set of beliefs, and a communal identity that was under threat of being erased from the world above. The endurance of faith became as meticulously planned for as the supply of air and water. It was the invisible sustenance that made the physical endurance possible. In the silent, lamplit glow of an underground church, the community found the resilience to wait, to hope, and to believe that one day they would emerge back into the light. But these silent chapels also hold a clue to a deeper mystery, one that challenges the very story we think we know. If you look closely at the walls of Derinkuyu or the other cities, you will notice something strange. The carving styles are not uniform. In some chambers, the marks are rough, almost haphazard, made with simple tools. In others, the surfaces are smooth, the angles precise, the doorways elegantly arched. This is not the work of a single generation or even a single civilization. It is a puzzle written in stone, and it points to a startling possibility. The master builders of these cities may not have been a single group of people at all. The early Christians are the most famous inhabitants, the ones who gave the cities their final, breathtaking form. But archaeologists now believe the first cuts into the rock may have happened 1,000 years before a single cross was ever etched into these walls. Who were these first architects? One compelling candidate is the Phrygians, an ancient people who ruled central Turkey centuries before the Common Era. They were known for carving monumental facades into cliffs, like the famous Midas monument. Their expertise in rock-cut architecture is undeniable. Could their knowledge have been the seed, the initial experiment in living within the earth that later cultures discovered and expanded? Then there are the Persians. Their empire stretched into this region, and they brought with them a genius for underground engineering, exemplified by their Qanat water systems. The sophisticated ventilation in Cappadocia bears a striking conceptual resemblance to those ancient aqueducts. Did Persian engineers or local builders influenced by them apply that same thinking to the problem of air, transforming deep shelters from temporary holes into livable spaces? The questions multiply with each layer of excavation. Some researchers even point to faint, almost unrecognizable markings and pottery shards that suggest activity from far earlier, from Neolithic peoples who first settled these valleys. Were the very first chambers simple storage pits or seasonal dwellings, dug by the earliest farmers? What emerges from the stone is not a simple timeline, but a palimpsest. Imagine a parchment that has been written on, scraped clean, and written on again over centuries. Each civilization that passed through Cappadocia or sought refuge there seems to have left its signature in the tuff. They found the existing tunnels and rooms, saw their potential, and added their own layer. They widened corridors, dug new levels, improved the air shafts, and carved their own symbols. The early Christians did not build Derinkuyu from scratch. They inherited it. They were the last, and perhaps the most ambitious, in a long line of architects who understood that safety lay in the earth. This collaborative mystery changes everything. It means the underground cities are not a monument to one period of fear, but a cumulative legacy of human resilience across ages. They are a physical record of a recurring idea, that when the world above becomes unstable, the answer is to go down. Each generation contributed its ingenuity to a shared, subterranean blueprint for survival. The identity of the true master builder dissolves into the collective effort of countless anonymous hands across a millennium. This revelation makes the cities even more profound. They are not just a Christian refuge or a Hittite storehouse. They are a library of human adaptation, its shelves carved from solid rock, waiting for us to decode its full story. And if the cities were built by many, then what exactly were they all hiding from? The answer leads us to the most chilling theory of all. The true scope of this hidden world is almost beyond comprehension. We have been speaking of cities in the plural, but the reality is far more astonishing. Across Cappadocia, archaeologists have documented over 200 separate underground settlements. Some are vast, multi-level metropolises like Derinkuyu. Others are smaller villages or perhaps outposts carved into the sides of valleys. For decades, each was studied as an isolated refuge, a singular response to a local threat. But a haunting question began to emerge from the darkness. Were they ever truly alone? Local legends and fragmentary historical accounts have long spoken of secret passageways linking these places. The most famous tale is of an 8-kilometer tunnel, a subterranean highway said to connect the great city of Derinkuyu with another major complex, Kaymaklı. Could it be possible? The idea seems fantastical, a feat of ancient engineering that would rival the great aqueducts of Rome. Yet, modern exploration is beginning to suggest the legends may hold a kernel of truth. Teams using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies have detected anomalies, voids and channels in the earth that stretch far beyond the mapped boundaries of known cities. These are not natural formations. They line up, they maintain a consistent direction, and they hint at deliberate, hidden corridors. The evidence is not yet definitive. Excavating such fragile, deep tunnels is perilous work, but the implication is staggering. We may not be looking at a collection of independent shelters. We may be looking at the scattered districts of a single, vast, subterranean territory. Imagine a hidden country lying beneath the Anatolian plain, a network of connected safe houses, supply routes, and communication lines. This transforms the entire narrative. A single city could be besieged and its supplies cut off, but a network that allows for movement, for reinforcement, for the transfer of populations and resources from one threatened zone to another. It suggests a level of coordination and long-term strategic planning that rewrites our understanding of these societies. They were not just hunkering down in their own cellars. They were potentially maintaining a secret infrastructure, a parallel world operating in the silence beneath the feet of whatever empires or armies controlled the surface. The full scale of this network remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of archaeology. How many hundreds of kilometers might it span? Were there central hubs, way stations, or even underground markets? Each new scan, each cautious excavation, peels back another layer of this buried map. What we are slowly uncovering is not merely architecture, but the ghost of a forgotten geography, a testament to a people who did not just hide from the world, but built an entirely new one beneath it, whose true borders we are still struggling to find. The sheer scale of these cities forces us to confront the terrifying question at their core. What kind of threat could justify burying an entire civilization? The answer is not simple, for the stone walls seem to have been built in response to a spectrum of fears, each theory revealing a different facet of an ancient collective nightmare. The most immediate and historically documented threat was the relentless tide of invasion. For centuries, Cappadocia lay in the path of empires on the march. The Arab raids of the 7th and 8th centuries were a constant terror, swift cavalry attacks that could descend without warning to seize goods and captives. Later, the Mongol hordes under leaders like Tamerlane swept through with a reputation for overwhelming force. Against such mobile enemies, a fortified castle on a hill was a target. But a city with no visible footprint, its entrance hidden and sealed by a stone wheel, was a ghost. An army could ride right over it, never knowing thousands of people were holding their breath in the darkness below. This theory of warfare is direct and visceral, a response to a clear and present danger. The cities become the ultimate panic rooms, scaled to protect not a family, but an entire culture from being erased by the sword. Yet, some historians argue that while raids could trigger a retreat, they do not fully explain the city's capacity for months of endurance. A raid passes in days. You build a hidden door for a raid, not a subterranean vineyard. This suggests a second, more insidious threat, one that could linger for generations: religious persecution. For the early Christian communities, the danger was not a passing army but a permanent state of being hunted. Under certain Roman emperors and later under some Islamic rulers, adherence to a faith outside the sanctioned orthodoxy could mean punishment, displacement, or worse. The cities provided a permanent sanctuary, a place where rituals could be practiced in secret, identity preserved, and children raised in the faith away from the eyes of authorities. This was a slow-burning apocalypse of the soul, a fear not of physical death alone but of cultural extinction. The hidden churches are the strongest evidence for this motive, turning the cities into arks for belief. But there is a third, more speculative theory that chills in a different way. What if the builders were preparing for a threat from the sky itself? Ancient chronicles from various cultures speak of years without summer, of strange lights and portents. Tree ring and ice core data from the mid-6th century, for instance, point to a dramatic global cooling event, possibly triggered by a cluster of volcanic eruptions. The sky would have darkened, crops would have failed, and famine would have spread. In such a scenario, the underground cities offered a stable, insulated environment. The Earth's constant temperature would protect against freezing cold or searing heat above. The stored grain and protected water could outlast years of failed harvests. Some researchers even point to mythologies describing comet sightings or solar anomalies, events that ancient peoples might interpret as the heavens turning against them. This theory frames the cities not as a refuge from human enemies, but as a shelter from a collapsing world. They become a lifeboat for humanity, a deliberate withdrawal from a surface grown hostile, whether by climate, catastrophe, or celestial anger. Each theory, from the marching army to the failing sun, paints the builders not as paranoid but as profoundly pragmatic realists. They looked at their unstable world and made a radical choice. They invested generations of labor not in monuments to their gods or kings, but in a single, monumental project: survival itself. The cities stand as a testament to a very human calculation, that when you cannot control the world above, your only hope is to build a new one below. This instinct to seek refuge in the earth is not unique to Cappadocia. It is a story written across the globe, in the very bones of every continent. Look to the sun-baked cliffs of the American Southwest, where the ancestral Pueblones constructed the breathtaking cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde. These were not cities carved down, but communities built up, tucked into high, natural alcoves in canyon walls. Their architecture was a vertical fortress, accessible only by precarious hand and toe holds or removable ladders, a brilliant defense against raiding parties. Yet the motivation echoes Cappadocia, a people leveraging the landscape itself for communal security in a precarious world. Far across the sea, in the arid south of Tunisia, lies the troglodyte village of Matmata. Here, the Berber people created not cliffside homes but sunken courtyards. They would dig a large, circular pit in the ground and then carve their rooms outward from its walls, creating a sheltered, communal interior space that was invisible from the surrounding desert. This design provided natural insulation from the blistering heat and offered protection from the region's historical conflicts. It is another testament to the same principle, using the earth as both shelter and shield. In China, during eras of conflict, Villagers in places like Yanking dug extensive underground complexes, complete with living quarters, storage, and secret escape tunnels to hide from marauding armies. Each of these sites represents a powerful, independent solution to the same fundamental problem: how to make a community disappear when danger arrives. So what sets the cities of Cappadocia apart in this global family of underground refuges? The answer lies in their breathtaking ambition and complexity. While Mesa Verde is a stunning vertical settlement and Matmata a brilliant sunken village, Cappadocia represents something else entirely: a fully inverted, multi-level metropolis. It is the difference between a fortified hilltop town and a submerged capital city. The scale is the first staggering distinction. Cappadocia's major cities were designed to house not hundreds, but tens of thousands, a population density underground that is unmatched in the ancient world. Then there is the depth. These are not shallow shelters or cliff-face apartments. They are labyrinths that plunge the equivalent of a 20-story building into the bedrock, a verticality of fear and preparation that is profound. But perhaps the most telling difference is in the integrated urban planning. Cappadocia was not just a collection of hiding holes. It was a pre-planned ecosystem with specialized zones, a gravity-fed water supply, engineered ventilation, dedicated spaces for worship, industry, and livestock, and that signature defensive system of rolling stone doors. This was not a reactive hideout. It was a proactive blueprint for sustaining an entire civilization through a long, indeterminate crisis. This comparative view reveals a profound truth. The drive to dig in, to use the planet as armor, is a universal human response to existential threat. From the deserts of Africa to the canyons of America, when faced with annihilation, our instinct is to become part of the landscape, to vanish into it. Cappadocia, however, represents the absolute zenith of this instinct. It is where the impulse to hide evolved into a master plan to endure, to wait out not just a storm, but potentially an end of days. It stands as perhaps the most elaborate and community-oriented manifestation of a survival strategy written into our species' memory. This global pattern underscores a chilling, shared understanding across cultures and millennia that safety is often not found in rising towers but in silent depths. The silence of these cities holds a different kind of mystery, one written in the flawless geometry of the stone itself. How did ancient builders, working without blueprints or modern mathematics, create structures of such enduring stability? The soft tuff that made carving easy also presented a monumental engineering risk. Dig too wide a room and the ceiling could collapse. Stack too many levels and the entire complex might buckle under its own weight. Yet, walking through Derinkuyu today, you are struck by the profound solidity. The ceilings are domed or arched, a shape that naturally distributes the immense weight of the earth above outward and down the walls. The builders understood this principle intuitively. They left strategic columns of untouched rock to act as central supports, and they carved rooms with rounded corners to prevent stress fractures from starting. This was not guesswork. It was applied physics learned through generations of working the stone. The precision of the ventilation shafts is perhaps the greatest testament to their hidden science. These are not random holes punched toward the sky. To create a consistent airflow through 100 meters of rock, the shafts had to be almost perfectly vertical. A significant deviation would disrupt the delicate thermal draft, the very breath of the city. How did they achieve such alignment without lasers or transits? They may have used simple, brilliant tools like water levels, or perhaps a system of aligned plumb bobs, transferring a true vertical line down through the darkness one level at a time. This speaks to a profound, accumulated knowledge, a deep dialogue between the builders and the mountain. Some researchers look at this seamless integration of architecture, hydraulics, and aerodynamics and see the ghost of a much older teacher. Could the foundational principles have come from a sophisticated civilization now lost to history? The Hittites were master engineers, but their surface fortresses are of a different order. The Persians, with their Qanat systems, demonstrated a genius for managing invisible resources underground. It is compelling to think that refugees or traders from these empires might have brought with them core concepts of subterranean engineering, seeds of knowledge that found their ultimate expression in the soft rock of Cappadocia. The most likely explanation, however, honors the anonymous architects on their own terms. Their genius was not in possessing a single, lost textbook of advanced science. It was in the relentless, pragmatic accumulation of empirical knowledge. This was a science of observation and consequence, passed from parent to child, from master digger to apprentice, over hundreds of years. They learned which rock layers were stable and which were friable. They understood how sound traveled through tunnels, using it to gauge distance and detect weaknesses. They observed the behavior of smoke and water, and they engineered solutions based on those intimate truths. Their methods continue to baffle and impress modern engineers because they represent a different path to the same destination, a monument not to theoretical science but to applied wisdom. These cities stand today not as ruins but as fully intact artifacts because their builders possessed a deep, almost sacred respect for the forces they were harnessing. They worked with the earth, not just in it, creating a partnership between human ingenuity and geological reality that has, quite literally, stood the test of time. The genius of these cities was tested not in moments of crisis, but in the quiet, endless rhythm of daily life. Sustaining thousands of people for months required solving the most mundane, yet most critical human problems, beginning with the most basic need of all, food. The deep, subterranean chambers offered a natural advantage, a consistently cool and dark environment perfect for preservation. Vast rooms were dedicated to storing the community's lifeline, grains like wheat and barley, dried legumes, and salted or smoked meats. These were not haphazard piles, but carefully organized reserves, likely monitored and rationed with meticulous care. The stability of the Earth's temperature acted as a natural refrigerator, preventing spoilage and protecting the harvest from the insects and rodents that plagued surface granaries. This was long-term thinking made tangible, a buffer of calories against an uncertain future. But a stored meal creates waste, and in a sealed environment, managing that byproduct was a matter of life and death. The threat of illness from contamination was a silent enemy potentially more deadly than any invader. The builders engineered a simple yet effective solution. Dedicated pits, often located on the lowest levels away from living and storage areas, served as the primary means of waste disposal. More impressive was the subtle slope engineered into the floors of corridors and rooms. This intentional gradient allowed for liquid waste and runoff to be channeled away from living spaces, guiding it toward these collection points or into deeper, isolated fissures in the rock. This rudimentary sanitation system was a triumph of foresight, a clear understanding that survival meant rigorously separating the clean from the contaminated within their own stone womb. Then there was the profound, perpetual challenge of darkness. Imagine a world without a sunrise, where time is measured only by the fading of a lamp's flame. Light was a precious commodity, carefully managed. The primary source would have been simple oil lamps, small clay vessels filled with olive oil or animal fat, with a wick floating in the center. Their glow was faint and smoky, but in the absolute blackness of a sealed level, even a single lamp would have felt like a beacon of normalcy. For larger communal spaces, torches may have been used sparingly. But the true architectural gift for illumination were the light wells. These were narrower shafts, distinct from the deep ventilation channels, designed to funnel tiny slivers of daylight from the surface down to specific central areas. A resident standing in just the right spot might see a single, dusty beam of sunlight, a priceless connection to the world above, and a vital tool for maintaining circadian rhythms. This careful management of light and dark speaks to the psychological dimension of their endurance. The flickering lamps were not just tools, they were anchors to humanity, pushing back against the disorienting void and carving out pockets of warmth and community in the endless night. This detailed portrait of daily logistics transforms the cities from a dramatic hiding place into a masterpiece of mundane resilience. Every meal, every cleared passage, every lit lamp was a small victory against entropy. It reveals a society that had planned not just for the drama of a siege, but for the grinding reality of a months-long vigil. They turned a geological shelter into a living, breathing habitat through an intimate, daily dance with their resources. This comprehensive system of food, waste, and light stands as a quiet, profound testament to their determination, proving they were not merely waiting in the dark, but living within it on their own carefully managed terms. The story of these cities entered its most dramatic chapter under the vast, gilded dome of the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, this eastern remnant of Rome stood as a Christian bulwark against a rising tide of change. To its southeast, the newly established Islamic caliphates were expanding, their forces launching wave after wave of raids into Byzantine Anatolia. Cappadocia was no longer just a remote refuge for the pious. It was now a militarized frontier zone, a buffer between two worlds. In this era of relentless, low-intensity conflict, the underground cities underwent a final, decisive transformation. They were no longer just secret shelters, they became official, state-sanctioned strongholds, integrated directly into the empire's defensive strategy. The soft rock that had protected beliefs now protected borders. The Byzantine military governors saw the genius of the existing complexes and expanded upon it with imperial resources. They fortified the entrances further, sometimes constructing small surface castles or watchtowers directly above the hidden access points, creating a layered defense. Inside, the expansion was systematic. New levels were carved to serve as barracks for garrison troops, with armories for storing weapons and armor. Vast, vaulted chambers became secure depots for grain, oil, and weapons shipped from across the empire, stockpiled to withstand years of siege. The cities evolved into secure logistical hubs, places where the Byzantine army could regroup, resupply, and launch counter-raids without fear of their base being overrun. When scouts spotted dust clouds on the horizon signaling a raid, the alarm would sound across the valleys. Soldiers would usher the local population, farmers, merchants, families, into the depths, sealing the great stone doors behind them. The army might then use hidden secondary exits to harass the invaders, knowing their families and supplies were safe deep underground. This turned the entire region into a porcupine, its soft exterior hiding a network of sharp, unpredictable defenses. This Byzantine phase represents the ultimate evolution of the city's purpose. They transitioned from places of passive hiding to instruments of active, strategic warfare. They allowed a relatively small military force to project power and protect a large civilian population across a wide, open landscape. The empire was not just tolerating these subterranean refuges, it was actively maintaining and improving them, drafting the very earth into its army. This connection to a grand imperial narrative is crucial. It moves the cities from the margins of history to its center stage. They were not the forgotten project of fringe groups, but a recognized, vital organ in the body of one of history's greatest empires. Their tunnels became the empire's underground arteries, pumping the lifeblood of security through a vulnerable region. This period of peak use and sophistication, spanning centuries, cemented their final form. It also answers a lingering question about their abandonment. For when the Byzantine frontier eventually collapsed and the political landscape stabilized under new rulers, the overwhelming, immediate need for such vast collective fortresses simply faded away. The cities were not destroyed, they were gradually left in the careful dark, Their great stone doors rolled shut for the last time, becoming not ruins, but perfectly preserved time capsules of a world that lived in constant preparation for a storm that finally passed. The great stone doors remained sealed for centuries, their silent vigil undisturbed until a single, ordinary act tore a hole in time. In 1963, a resident of the town now called Derinkuyu was renovating his basement. As he knocked down a wall, the rubble gave way not to more earth but to a yawning darkness. Holding a lamp forward, he saw a passageway sloping down into the deep, a corridor carved with intent, untouched for perhaps 500 years. He had not just found a hidden room, he had unsealed the entrance to a forgotten world. This accidental discovery ignited a new chapter for the underground cities, shifting them from local legend to a global archaeological sensation. Word spread quickly, bringing teams of researchers to the site. Their initial explorations were exercises in awe and caution. They descended with ropes and lanterns into abysses of unknown depth, mapping rooms that had known only darkness for half a millennium. Each new level revealed the staggering scale of the complex, confirming that this was not a mere cave system, but a lost metropolis. The modern era of exploration had begun, not with a grand expedition, but with a homeowner's hammer. The work of bringing these cities back into the light is painstaking and delicate. Excavation is a slow dance with fragility, as the soft tuff can be damaged by vibration or even sudden changes in humidity. Archaeologists must carefully remove centuries of accumulated silt and debris, often by hand, to avoid collapsing the very structures they seek to preserve. Every object found, from a broken oil lamp to a grain of barley, is a data point, a whisper from the daily life of those who lived here. But the mission today is twofold: to understand the past while protecting it for the future. The very act of rediscovery created a new challenge: mass tourism. Thousands of visitors now walk the ancient corridors each year, their breath and footsteps introducing moisture and wear to an environment sealed for ages. Managing this impact is a constant balance, requiring carefully controlled pathways, lighting that minimizes algae growth, and limits on visitor numbers to prevent the atmosphere that preserved the cities from now destroying them. The goal is to keep these places not as static museum exhibits, but as living historical landscapes you can still experience. To peer into areas too dangerous or unstable for people to enter, archaeologists now employ eyes of light. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses into the earth, mapping hidden voids and tunnels like a sonogram for the soil. Three-dimensional laser scanning creates perfect digital replicas of entire chambers, allowing researchers to study architectural details and erosion patterns from anywhere in the world. This technology is revealing secrets the first excavators could only guess at. Scans suggest networks of tunnels extending far beyond the currently toured areas, hinting that the explored city might only be the core of something even more vast. They can analyze stress fractures in ceilings to predict collapses before they happen, and virtually reconstruct how light from a single oil lamp would have filled a room, giving us a truer sense of the ancient atmosphere. According to contemporary archaeologists working on site, these tools are transforming their understanding. They are no longer just clearing rooms, they are mapping a buried urban anatomy, seeing how the circulatory system of air shafts connected to the communal hearts of the great halls. Each scan is like turning a page in a manuscript written in stone and space. This bridge from ancient construction to modern discovery is vital. It reminds us that Derinkuyu and its sister cities are not dead ruins. They are active sites of historical inquiry, puzzles where every new tool can reveal a new piece. The story did not end when the last door was sealed. It was merely paused, waiting in the dark for a light to find it again, proving that even the deepest secrets of the past are never truly lost, only waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. Descending through the city is a journey backward in architectural time. The upper floors, with their smooth walls and defined rooms, feel organized, almost domestic. But as you go deeper, the character of the stone changes. The walls become rougher, the passages narrower and more erratic. You arrive at the very lowest levels, and here the blueprint seems to fade into shadow. These deepest chambers are the most enigmatic spaces in the entire complex. They lack the clear signs of daily life found above. No carved benches for gathering, no obvious hearths for cooking, no niches for oil lamps. Their purpose is not written in the architecture, and that silence has spawned some of the most compelling theories about the city's ultimate design. One prevailing idea is that these were the final redoubts, the last sanctuary within the sanctuary. If an enemy ever breached the upper doors and fought their way down level by level, the remaining population could retreat to this rudimentary maze. Here, with the last stone door sealed, they would be at the deepest point of safety, but also at the farthest remove from light, air, and the world. It would have been a place of absolute last resort, a holding cell for hope itself, where a community would wait in utter darkness for a threat to pass or for a tragic end. Other researchers look at the raw, unfinished quality and see a practical function. These deep, cool, stable environments would have been ideal for specialized storage. Perhaps they held the most valuable communal reserves, seed grain for replanting after a crisis, sacred religious items, or precious metals. Their inaccessibility was their security, protecting the assets essential for the community's rebirth once it emerged. A more speculative theory points to ritual. In many ancient cultures, the deepest earth was associated with the sacred, with initiation or communion with ancestral forces. Could these bare chambers have been used for secluded meditation, for rites that required total separation from the living world above? The simplicity would then be intentional, stripping away distraction to focus on the spiritual. Then there is the most chilling hypothesis, one of final, desperate defense. Some note channels and depressions in the rock on these low levels. Could the builders have designed a way to flood them intentionally? By diverting the underground water source, they could have created an impassable moat of rising water, a final, tragic barrier between themselves and any pursuer. This would have been a catastrophic option, sacrificing the lowest third of their city to save the upper levels, a testament to planning for the unthinkable. The truth is, we may never know. The emptiness of these deep floors is a blank canvas for our questions. They remind us that for all we have mapped, the full intention of the builders remains just out of reach. These bottom levels were the ultimate contingency plan, and their very ambiguity suggests the architects prepared for scenarios so severe they defy our comfortable imagination. What does it say about a society that it dug not just to live, but to have a place to make its final stand? This mystery pulls us downward, hinting that the city's deepest secret is still buried, not in lost artifacts, but in the profound, unsettling foresight of the people who carved them. The profound silence of those deepest chambers was a secret meant to last forever. Yet today, that silence is gently broken by the murmur of voices from around the world. The very cities engineered for absolute secrecy and exclusion have now been inscribed on a list that celebrates shared human heritage, designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This transformation is one of history's great ironies, spaces built to protect a few from the many now serving as a global commons, welcoming thousands of visitors each year to learn and wonder. This journey from survival shelter to tourist destination is a delicate dance, a constant negotiation between preservation and access. The soft tuff that made the cities possible is also their greatest vulnerability. The moisture from human breath, the touch of countless hands, even the vibration of footsteps can, over time, degrade the very walls that have stood for a millennium. Conservationists work tirelessly to manage this impact, installing carefully calibrated lighting that minimizes growth, designing walkways that protect the original floors, and limiting the number of people in the most fragile areas at any one time. The goal is not to lock the past away, but to steward it so that future generations can still feel its power, understanding that every visitor is now a temporary guardian of this legacy. To walk these corridors today is to experience a profound sensory shift. You leave the bright, arid heat of the Turkish plains and descend into a cool, still darkness. The air grows damp and carries a distinct, ancient scent of stone and earth. Your world narrows to the width of a passageway, your shoulders sometimes brushing against walls worn smooth by time and touch. You must stoop through low doorways, moving in single file, a physical reminder of the constrained reality of its inhabitants. In the dim, artificial light, you can see the thousands of pick marks on the walls, each one a testament to human labor and determination. This is not like visiting a castle or a temple. It is an immersive, almost bodily understanding of a hidden life. You feel the weight of the mountain above you, grasp the ingenious slope of a floor, and stand in a central hall where the acoustics seem designed to carry a whisper. The experience inevitably turns personal and contemplative. Visitors often speak of a hushed awe, a sense of connection to the resilience of those who carved this refuge. The spaces built for fear now inspire reflection on safety, community, and what we consider essential. Children marvel at the idea of a city turned upside down, while historians see a masterclass in social organization. The original intent, to vanish from the world, has been completely inverted. Now the world comes to them. This evolution from a closed fortress to an open classroom is a powerful testament to how human creations can transcend their original purpose. The builders sought to preserve a specific way of life from imminent threat. They could never have imagined that their sanctuary would one day preserve something else entirely, a universal story of human adaptation for audiences from every culture. The stone wheels meant to block enemies now frame photographs for tourists. The ventilation shafts that hid smoke now illuminate the genius of ancient engineers for school groups. The hidden churches that sheltered a persecuted faith now speak to visitors of all beliefs about the enduring search for meaning. This is the ultimate fate of these underground cities, not as forgotten tombs, but as living lessons. They remind us that the structures we build in our most fearful hours can, with time and peace, become our greatest bridges, offering not a retreat from humanity, but a deeper connection to its shared, resilient spirit. Their story no longer ends with a sealed door, but with an open invitation to look into the depths and see a reflection of our own capacity to endure and ultimately to understand. Yet the most profound fear may not have marched on horseback but fallen from the stars. Across the scattered records of ancient civilizations, a hauntingly similar motif appears: stories of a sky turned hostile. The Roman historian Livy wrote of stones falling from the heavens. Chinese annals from the 1st century before the Common Era described nights so bright one could read, followed by months of dimmed suns and failing harvests. Indigenous legends from the Americas speak of a time when the sun died and the world was remade in fire and ice. These are not mere myths of gods warring, but potential eyewitness accounts of cosmic violence, of comet debris showers, or the atmospheric aftermath of a significant asteroid impact. Such an event would not be a localized raid but a global cataclysm. The sky would glow with terrifying fireballs, followed by a long, cold twilight as dust and ash shrouded the sun, triggering a volcanic winter that could last for years. In the face of such a scenario, every survival strategy of the surface world becomes useless. Your fortified city is just a target for falling rock. Your fields are buried in ash or frozen solid. Your only hope is to go where the sky cannot reach. This speculative scenario, while not proven, provides a chillingly logical explanation for the city's most extreme features. Their depth was not just about hiding from people, but from the sky itself. Dozens of meters of solid rock provide exceptional shielding from radiation, from the intense heat of atmospheric entry, and from the torrent of debris that would rain down in the immediate aftermath. The sophisticated ventilation system takes on a new, critical role, filtering out potentially toxic dust and ash that could linger in the atmosphere for years, ensuring the air deep below remained breathable long after the surface air became poison. The vast stores of food and independent water supply were not for a season of siege, but for a generation of waiting, for the slow, patient work of outlasting a planetary-scale winter until the sun could once again warm the soil. Could a fear this vast, this astronomical, truly have driven the construction? It is a compelling thought that the builders were not just preparing for the end of their world, but for the end of the world, full stop. Their project then becomes something far grander than a refugee camp. It transforms into an ark, a lifeboat carved not from wood, but from the living continent itself, designed to preserve the seed of humanity through a celestial reset. This idea positions the underground cities not as relics of a paranoid past, but as profound, if intuitive, blueprints for planetary resilience. In our modern age, where we calculate the trajectories of near-Earth objects and discuss existential risks from nuclear winter to supervolcanoes, the silent logic of Cappadocia resonates with uncomfortable clarity. It represents a prehistoric form of long-termism, a monumental investment by a society that looked at the heavens and decided the greatest safety lay in the deepest earth. Whether this was their true motivation remains locked in the stone, but the very possibility reframes these ancient tunnels. They stand as a testament to a species that, at its most perceptive, understands that the greatest threats can come from beyond the horizon, and that survival sometimes means having the courage to retreat into the dark, to wait, and to trust that a world worth returning to will one day bloom again above. The logic carved into Cappadocia's rock is not a relic, it is a recurring blueprint. Today, that same blueprint is drawn in steel and concrete, buried beneath mountains in South Dakota or scattered across remote landscapes in New Zealand. These are the modern doomsday bunkers, the fortified retreats for a survivalist age. The parallels are immediate and uncanny. Both ancient engineers and contemporary builders prioritize the same non-negotiable pillars: security from external threat, a guaranteed supply of clean air and water, and the capacity for long-term, self-sufficient habitation. The massive stone door that sealed Derinkuyu finds its echo in the blast-proof, hydraulic hatches of a 21st century shelter. The deep, protected wells mirror today's sophisticated water filtration and recycling systems. The ventilation shafts designed to hide smoke and regulate atmosphere are the ancestors of advanced air scrubbers and geothermal climate control. The core impulse is identical: to create an insulated world capable of enduring while the one outside falters. Yet the philosophy behind these structures has undergone a profound shift. The underground cities of Cappadocia were fundamentally communal projects. They were built by and for an entire society, a collective investment in the preservation of a community, its culture, and its future generations. The scale required cooperation, a shared social contract to manage resources and space in the darkness. Modern survivalism, while diverse, often trends toward a more individualistic or familial focus. The high-tech bunker, stocked with years of supplies and cutting-edge gear, is frequently envisioned as a sanctuary for a single family or a small, select group. It represents a withdrawal from the collective, a privatization of the apocalypse. The ancient cities were arks meant to carry a civilization. Many modern bunkers are lifeboats designed for a chosen few. This contrast invites a difficult but necessary reflection. What do our own hidden constructions reveal about contemporary fears? The Cappadocians prepared for tangible, historical threats, invasions, religious persecution, or perhaps climatic shifts they could witness. Our modern subterranean ambitions often grapple with more abstract, global, or technologically born anxieties. The threat of widespread conflict, pandemics, or environmental instability. The ancient response was to dig deep together. Our modern iteration often involves building a fortified exit. This difference speaks volumes about changes in how we perceive community and risk. It suggests that while the instinct to seek shelter is timeless, our vision of who deserves a place in that shelter and what we are sheltering from has dramatically evolved. Ultimately, this parallel makes the endeavor of those ancient builders strikingly, urgently relevant. It shows that the drive to build an ark against a perceived end is not a historical curiosity, but a persistent thread in the human story. We have not outgrown the impulse, we have simply updated its toolkit. The conversation shifts from ancient history to a mirror held up to our own time. It asks us to consider what we value enough to save, and whether, in our most careful plans for survival, we are building mere shelters or the seeds of a world worth resurfacing into. The stone of Cappadocia poses a quiet challenge across the centuries, reminding us that the deepest security may not lie in how well we can hide, but in what we choose to preserve together. The stone walls hold more than just the weight of the mountain, they hold whispers. Beyond the grand engineering and defensive genius, the true voice of the underground cities is found in their smallest details, in the delicate carvings and symbols etched into the rock by the hands of those who lived here. These are not the bold declarations of kings on monuments, but the quiet, personal language of a community in hiding, a non-verbal dialogue scratched into the very fabric of their sanctuary. To walk these corridors today is to walk through a gallery of silent statements, each mark a clue to the hearts and minds of people we can never truly know. The most common symbol, appearing with a comforting regularity, is the cross. You find them everywhere, from the formal spaces of the rock-cut churches to the walls of simple family dwellings. Some are carefully incised with equal arms, a clear statement of Christian faith. Others are simpler, almost hurried-looking scratches. This repetition speaks volumes. In a world where sunlight and open worship were often denied, the act of carving a cross was an act of defiant affirmation. It was a way to consecrate a space, to mark it as belonging not just to a family, but to a faith. It transformed a cold stone room into a blessed home, a constant tactile reminder of the belief that justified their life in the depths. Alongside the crosses, another ancient Christian symbol occasionally appears, the fish or ichthys. In the early church, this was a secret sign, a code among believers when being open about one's faith was dangerous. Its presence underground is deeply poignant. Even in their ultimate hiding place where everyone shared the same secret, the habit of coded identity persisted. It was a cultural fingerprint, a way of saying, we are who we are, even here. But not all markings are overtly religious. Look closely and you'll see other patterns, geometric shapes, spirals, grids, and series of lines that look almost like tallies. Some researchers believe these could be clan markings or family signs, a way to denote ownership of a storage chamber or a living space in the communal labyrinth. Others suggest they might have served a practical purpose, like directional signs. A series of arrows or a specific symbol at a tunnel junction could have been a vital way to navigate the confusing, dark maze, especially for children or newcomers. A simple spiral near a ventilation shaft might have indicated fresh air this way. In the absolute darkness, after the oil lamps were dimmed to conserve fuel, these tactile signs, felt with the fingers, could have been as important as a street sign is to us. Then there are the marks that seem purely human, the idle scratches, the testing of a chisel's edge, the practice strokes of an apprentice carver. These are perhaps the most moving. They remind us that this was not just a fortress, but a place where people grew up, learned trades, and spent countless hours. A smooth section of wall near a common sitting area, might be worn down by the touch of countless shoulders over generations. These ephemeral traces pull the grand narrative down to a human scale. They force us to remember that the city was not a machine, but a collection of individuals, each with their own fears, hopes, and need to leave some small proof that they were here. The silent language of the walls completes our understanding. The massive stone doors tell us what they were afraid of. The ventilation shafts tell us how they planned to survive. But these faint carvings, the crosses and the cryptic lines, tell us who they were. They reveal a society clinging fiercely to its identity, organizing its hidden world with practical signs, and simply making a house a home in the only way they could, by leaving a personal mark on an impersonal stone. This layer of intimate communication turns the infrastructure from an archaeological site into a lived experience, a testament that even in the most constrained circumstances, the human spirit insists on expression, on meaning, and on saying, "I was here." The silent map of Cappadocia is far from complete. For every breathtaking chamber open to visitors, dozens more remain sealed in darkness, their secrets held in trust by the fragile stone. The cities we can walk through today represent only a fraction of what was built, and an even smaller fraction of what may still lie undiscovered. This is the seventh and perhaps most thrilling archaeological puzzle, the vast, unexcavated world waiting beneath our feet. The reasons for this careful pause are as practical as they are profound. Much of the known complexes are considered too unstable for traditional digging. The soft tuff, while easy to carve, is prone to collapse if disturbed after centuries of settling. A single misplaced shovel could bring down a ceiling that has stood for a millennium. There is also the immense challenge of funding and time, and a growing ethical priority, preservation over excavation. To open a new area is to expose it instantly to light, air, and human presence, beginning a slow process of erosion. Sometimes the most respectful thing an archaeologist can do is to leave a mystery buried, protecting it for future generations with better tools and wiser methods. Yet, we are no longer completely blind to these hidden spaces. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies act like X-rays for the Earth, painting a ghostly image of the subterranean landscape. These scans consistently reveal startling anomalies, voids and channels that extend far beyond the mapped tourist routes. They suggest networks of tunnels linking known districts, hinting at vast, unexcavated levels plunging even deeper than Derinkuyu's 8 stories, and possibly pointing toward entirely separate settlements still sleeping beneath neighboring valleys. The data creates a tantalizing, incomplete blueprint of a subterranean territory whose true scale we can only estimate. What might these untouched chambers contain? The potential finds could rewrite history. One dream of every archaeologist is the discovery of an intact archive, perhaps a hidden room with clay tablets, scrolls, or even early codices that record the names of the builders, their reasons for digging, and a precise chronology of construction. A single ledger could settle centuries of debate. More likely, but equally valuable, would be the everyday artifacts left behind in a sudden departure. A perfectly preserved oil lamp still sitting on a ledge, a child's toy carved from bone, or a basket of grain sealed in a storage room. These humble objects tell the story of daily life with an eloquence that grand architecture cannot. Then there is the most delicate possibility, the potential discovery of a final resting place. If found, such a site would be treated with the utmost reverence, and its study could offer unparalleled biological and cultural insights, from diet and health to burial customs, providing a silent, powerful testimony of the community itself. This forward-looking perspective changes everything. It means the story of the underground cities is not a closed book on a museum shelf, but an ongoing serial, with its most compelling chapters still being written in the dark. The work of interpretation is not finished. The next generation of explorers, armed with ever more sensitive scanners and perhaps even robotic probes, will be the ones to finally answer questions we can only ask today. They will decide which doors to open, which tunnels to follow, and which whispers from the stone to finally amplify into understanding. This unfinished nature is the ultimate gift of these cities. They remind us that history is not just about what we have found, but about what we have yet to discover, a perpetual invitation to wonder what still lies in the patient dark, waiting for its turn in the light. The true test of this stone ark was not its walls, but the society sealed inside them. For months on end, thousands of people shared a world of perpetual twilight, where every breath, every sound, and every morsel of food was a shared resource. In such pressure, brilliant engineering would mean nothing without an equally brilliant social contract. How did a community govern itself in the dark? The architecture itself suggests the answer, a system of rules born from absolute necessity, where the survival of all depended on the cooperation of each. The most immediate and constant concern was rationing. Stockpiled grain, oil, and water were the city's lifeblood, but they were finite. A council of elders, likely including religious figures and military leaders if a garrison was present, would have been responsible for a strict, transparent system of distribution. Portions would be measured not by wealth or status but by need, ensuring that children, the elderly, and those performing essential labor received their due. Hoarding or theft in such an environment would not be a crime against property, but against the community's very future, demanding swift and severe consequences to maintain trust. Noise, too, had to be governed. In the echoing stone chambers, a raised voice or a crying child could travel for levels, fraying nerves already stretched thin by fear and confinement. Quiet hours were likely enforced, creating pockets of predictable silence that offered psychological relief. Sanitation, as we have seen, was engineered into the slopes of the floors, but its upkeep required collective discipline. Families would be responsible for managing their waste according to the designed flow, and a rotation of duties would ensure the common collection areas were maintained, preventing the spread of illness in the stagnant air. Conflict was inevitable in such close quarters. A dispute between neighbors over a sleeping space or perceived unfairness in rations could not be allowed to fester. The central halls, those large communal spaces, likely served as impromptu courts. Here, respected leaders would mediate, their authority drawn from spiritual standing, wisdom, or martial prowess. The goal would not be complex justice, but swift restoration of harmony, for any lasting discord threatened the fragile social equilibrium that kept everyone alive. The psychological weight of this existence is difficult to overstate. Humans are not made for endless night. The lack of sunlight could lead to profound melancholy and physical lethargy. The constant, low-grade fear of what was happening above, mixed with the oppressive feel of the mountain's weight, would breed anxiety and claustrophobia. To combat this, the community would have relied heavily on ritual and rhythm. The daily gathering for prayer in the rock-cut churches provided not just spiritual solace, but structure. It marked the passage of time, offered a moment of collective hope, and reinforced the shared purpose that justified their sacrifice. Storytelling, singing quiet hymns, or sharing memories of the surface world would have been vital practices, weaving a tapestry of normalcy in the abnormal dark. Even shared labor, like grinding grain or maintaining the ventilation shafts, became a kind of social ritual, reinforcing interdependence and providing a sense of control in a powerless situation. This intricate dance of strict governance and nurturing community is the hidden masterpiece of the underground cities. It reveals that their builders understood a profound truth, that the greatest threat to a sealed refuge is not the enemy outside but the chaos within. They planned for the human heart as meticulously as they planned for water and air. The cities succeeded not because they had strong doors, but because the people behind those doors forged a social order strong enough to bear the immense weight of the world above, proving that resilience is not just carved in rock, but woven into the fabric of a community determined to endure together. The stone doors were sealed for the last time, and no one rolled them open again. This final silence is one of the deepest mysteries, for it was not a failure that emptied these cities, but a success. The very threats they were built to withstand gradually faded, leaving their profound protections without a purpose. Historians point to a slow relaxation of the tensions that once made the depths necessary. With the decline of the major Arab raids and the eventual stabilization of the Byzantine frontier, the constant, imminent danger that justified a life underground began to ebb. Later, under the expansive peace of the Ottoman Empire, known as the Pax Ottomana, the region entered a long period of relative security. Large-scale, persistent invasions were no longer a seasonal fear. When the surface world becomes safe, a fortress becomes a prison. Why live in a labyrinth of stone when you can build a home in the sunlight, tend fields in the open air, and worship in a visible church? The abandonment was likely not a single event, but a slow migration. Families probably began using the upper levels for cool storage or as stables, while their daily lives unfolded in villages above. Generation by generation, the memory of the full, desperate utility of the deep levels faded into legend, until finally, the last guardian simply walked up the ramp, leaving the great stone wheel in its niche and never returned. Environmental pressures may have played a role too. Some researchers suggest shifts in the water table could have flooded the lowest levels, or that earthquakes blocked critical passages, making the deepest sanctuaries inaccessible or too dangerous to maintain. Yet these physical changes alone do not explain the total relinquishment of such a colossal investment. The true cause was a shift in the human heart, a collective decision that the watchful, fearful vigilance of centuries could finally be set aside. This moment of abandonment is as significant as the moment of construction. It marks the closing of a monumental chapter in human adaptation, a transition from a mindset of perpetual siege to one of tentative surface security. It represents a profound hope that the world above could, after all, be a home. The cities were not conquered or destroyed, they were outlived. Their perfect preservation is a testament to this peaceful departure. They stand not as ruins of a fallen society, but as pristine artifacts of a fear that was finally allowed to rest. In their empty halls, we find the quiet echo of a community's greatest triumph, not just surviving the darkness, but eventually choosing to leave it behind for good. These cities are not relics of a forgotten fear, but a mirror held up to our own time. We have walked through their silent halls, felt the cool breath of their ventilation shafts, and traced the simple crosses carved by hands that sought meaning in the dark. From the volcanic canvas that birthed them to the final, peaceful decision to leave them behind, their story is a complete cycle of human adaptation. It is a narrative carved not in conquest but in endurance, a testament written in stone about the lengths a community will go to preserve its future. The true monument here is not the architecture, though it is breathtaking, but the unbreakable social contract it required, the profound understanding that survival is a collective act. As we step back into the sunlight, we leave behind a world that mastered the art of waiting, a civilization that chose to build its legacy not upward toward the heavens, but inward into the steadfast heart of the earth. Their silent stones ask us a quiet, persistent question. In our own age of uncertainty, what are we building? What deep shelters for the human spirit, what reservoirs of shared resilience are we carving into the bedrock of our own society for generations we may never meet? If these journeys into humanity's hidden chapters resonate with you, consider subscribing to continue exploring the forgotten corners of our shared past. And we would love to hear your perspective. What forms might our modern underground cities take? And what do they say about the hopes and fears of our time?